Are you someone that when you have a problem, you just want to vent about it? Or maybe you have friends that do this, and that's your solution to a problem. Well, I want to explain why venting not only doesn't help your problem, but actually can make your problem worse if you understand how the brain works. So the brain really determines what's significant in really two ways. The first way is if an event or fact is paired with a strong emotion, or you just repeat something so many times that your brain learns it. You don't have to necessarily be excited about it. And probably your experience with high school illustrates both of these points. Think back to all the facts you were taught in high school. You probably remember what, like 1% of those facts? But you probably remember the very emotionally significant events. You probably remember the date with your crush, or when a teacher yelled at you or humiliated you, or if you got bullied, or maybe even if you witnessed a funny prank. Now, there are some facts you actually do remember that you really didn't care to remember from an excitement standpoint, or you weren't punished if you didn't remember it, right? And that's just because of sheer repetition. I still remember certain facts because the teacher just like drilled it in our heads, right? Now, venting actually takes advantage of both of these ways that the brain learns, but not in a good way. I'll explain why that is here in a second. So venting pairs usually a negative emotion like jealousy, resentment, anger, sadness with a repeated story that you're telling yourself about the state that you're stuck in that you say you don't want to be in. Now, you may say it's a good thing, right, to get negative emotions associated with the problem so you'll get out of the problem. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. Because if you think about it, when you're giving strong emotional intensity to the problem and the story of the problem, that means you're not giving strong emotional intensity and repetition to the solution. And that's where the problem comes. If you've ever seen anybody who vents constantly, you can tell this. When they're telling their story of anger or resentment or the job they hate or their toxic partner, they are animated, they're emotional, they are motivated. But just start to bring up the solution and see how all that changes. Typically, the emotion levels drop to a certain level of flatness. And then in terms of telling how they're going to do the solution, usually they maybe say something very brief and then they try to change the subject, sometimes back to their emotionally intense story of how they're stuck. And that's why as a hypnotist, I always say that if you want to get out of a problem, start venting about the solution the way you vent about the problem.